It is time once again for college football in Columbus, Ohio. We are here at Ohio Stadium. The Ohio State Buckeyes are going to kick off their 2024 season at 3:30 p.m. on CBS against the Zips of the University of Akron, joined by Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, this is a season that feels like we have been through seasons where there's a lot of anticipation around the upcoming Ohio State season. But this year, just based on how last year ended and how quickly everything swung in the month of January, this feels like one where maybe this is one of the most anticipated seasons I can remember.
Yeah, I think if you want to rank them, maybe there's some recency bias, but it's hard to put this one below any of the others. And there have been some where they were expected to win a national championship that year. I always go back to 1998 because that was my first experience of it. But you could throw 2015 in there. You could throw 2003 in there when you had so much of that national championship team coming back. But this one, with so many people coming back, with so much yet to play for, I think you roll all of these things together, and it's hard to top this one in terms of anticipation.
Not only from an Ohio State perspective, but sport-wide.
Yeah.
There's so much that's new this year. You got the conference realignment, and hey, Ohio State and Oregon, Michigan and USC. These are all conference games now. Texas, Oklahoma in the SEC, the 12-team playoff. Even little stuff like hey, now there's a 2-minute warning. Hey, now they're using helmet radios. All this stuff is new this year. It feels like they just kind of took everything about college football last year and said, well, what if we changed everything? Not completely. They're not playing Calvin ball,
right.
But it's similar. It's going to be enough different in enough different ways that it just feels like this is going to be a really, really fascinating season where there have been years recently where you kind of went, okay, I can sort of see where this one's going. There's no historical precedent for this season with the way things are set up and the way the conferences are set up. This is going to be fascinating, it feels like, from beginning to end.
Well, and even writing the tip sheet this week, it's like the purpose of it used to be rooting to tell Buckeye fans which teams to root for the BCS. Mm-hmm. That, to get into the top two, basically.
Right, yeah.
And now it's like, it's all just root for whoever you want. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how fans react to a loss now. Yeah, it sucks, but how long does it feel that way?
Right. You look at the Ohio State-Oregon game, and we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. And we will talk about some of the news around today's Ohio State game in a minute, but you look at the Ohio State-Oregon game on October 12th, and that is going to be one where it feels like the team that wins that game is functionally going to be in the college football playoff, barring some just cataclysmic collapse after that. And the team that loses that game is probably still fine unless they have a cataclysmic collapse after that. You're going to get in as a Big Ten team that's 10-2, because if you're an Ohio State team that goes 10-2 this year, you have beaten at least one of Ohio State, or Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, and you've also beaten Nebraska. You've also beaten Iowa. You've got a decent resume. You're getting in at 10-2. It's a season where I think people are maybe set up to just be able to sit back and relax and enjoy it in a way they haven't necessarily been before. I'm not saying they're going to.
Okay.
Believe me, I understand they're not going to. But it feels like you're set up in a way where if you wanted to just enjoy this season and not stress about every failed third down conversion against Western Michigan, because what will it mean when they're at Oregon? This is a year when you could do that. People won't, because you have the natty or bust sort of mentality, and every negative thing is automatically going to be, oh, well, this means bad things are coming in the future. But you could just enjoy this college football season, which I have a vague recollection of that being why we all got into this in the first place.
That is true, but also even before it was like everything was about the national championship and you could enjoy a Rose Bowl season. Mm-hmm. Back then I do remember not wanting to have anything to do with ESPN after a loss. Like, I just need to be away from the entire game forever. So I don't expect that to change, but you can turn the page and then begin the process of healing maybe a little bit quicker, and knowing that there will be losses. If there are losses, you can avenge them. That same opponent, you don't even have to get over it. You can just get your revenge on that team. Perhaps, almost certainly in some aspects, you're going to have a very good chance to right a wrong, if you will.
Yeah, if Ohio State loses to Akron, I do not think they will get a chance to avenge
Fair.
that loss. If they lose to Oregon or maybe even Penn State, you might get a chance to see that team again, either in Indianapolis or on someone's campus site, or in one of the quarterfinal or semifinal or championship locations for the playoff this year. So let's, excuse me, popcorn kernel. First popcorn kernel of the season.
They've got popcorn now?
Stuck in my throat, yes.
Well, we need to wrap this up then.
Okay, well we have some stuff to get through before we wrap it up, and you go get popcorn. Buckeyes, you may need some popcorn for the first half of this game when the starters are in for Ohio State. This feels, this is a game where Ohio State's favored by 50 points, give or take. I've seen it at 50.5. I've seen it as low as 48.5. I mean, boy, the difference there feels like not that significant. It is a game where Ohio State should be able to do more or less whatever they want to do. It's also a game where I think you come in wondering how much are they really going to show.
Yeah.
But what would a successful first half for Ohio State look like today for you?
A number, how about 35-0? Like even 28 would be like, there must be a punt in there. But I think 35-0 might be about perfect in terms of doing everything right, converting your third downs, stopping third downs. Like that would be, Ryan Day wants all of the players to grade out at 80%. That would probably be about a 96% if they go 35-0. And it's something we have seen before in openers like this, or not just overmatched opponents where there is no doubt the entire way, or it doesn't take an entire first quarter for a field goal finally, the third drive of the game or something like that. So I think 35-0 would be a good start. It wouldn't, again, it's not 100%. I'm saying like a 96.
And it's funny. I'm looking as you're talking. My phone is blowing up, and it's a text with a bunch of friends that I went to Ohio State with, and my buddy John says, "Is it wrong that I kind of want to go 3 and out on the first drive today just to see the huge Australian punter boom?" I mean, there are lots of different ways to enjoy the 2024 college football season. I happen to be a little more Team John on this one, but there will be plenty of fun stuff to see, even on special teams this year. Let's, I guess, get real quickly to the sort of news of the day, the availability report, which is now out. There are 2 names on there that we had both heard a pretty good indication might be on there. I'm going to preface this with, it's okay. There are not long-term implications here. This sounds, from what I understand, like it's largely precautionary. However, left tackle Donovan Jackson, Mike linebacker Cody Simon, not playing today. Both of them are interesting. Donovan Jackson because of who's going to be replacing him, and Cody Simon because this is supposed to be the first game where you have the green dot helmet, and Cody Simon was supposed to be running the show on defense. So who replaces him, and how do you fit replace that in terms of handling all the communications for the first time?
Yeah, and first I'll correct Tom on Donovan Jackson. You said left tackle. I'm just saving.
I'm sorry,
saving
guard,
saving
guard,
the comments.
Guard.
But go ahead and throw those comments in there. I think there could be Carson Hinsman, could be Austin Seerveld. I don't really know yet who that's going to be, but we have seen both of those guys repping with the ones at times throughout practice at left guard. Austin Seerveld has also been doing some left tackle, so it makes me wonder, like, do they even, how do they feel about him going away from that right now and fully embracing guard again, which is what he was last year, and how healthy Carson Hinsman is, because we know he was dealing with the illness throughout camp. So I assume it'll be one of those two. I am fascinated to see what they do with replacing Cody Simon, because generally before, early in camp, his backup was always Gabe Powers, and he's kind of stayed with the twos, but also we heard all these great things about Arvell Reese and what he is doing and how he was the player of the game, I think, in one of these scrimmages, in the first scrimmage. And then like 3 weeks ago when I asked Jim Knowles, hey, the Sonny Styles, have you been working with him at middle linebacker at all? No, we don't want to put too much on his plate. Then this past week, he said, yes, Sonny can do it now. And I'm wondering if they've been doing that because Cody's been out. So there's been more opportunity to do that, and he's handled it well. So I wonder, do they go with Gabe Powers? Do they go with Arvell Reese, who has the momentum? Or do they go with 2 of their 3 starting linebackers and have Sonny Styles in the middle, CJ Hicks next to him?
Yeah, it's really an interesting question because both sides of the ball, you've got multiple completely legitimate, and it's really just a matter of do they want to go five best or do they want to go the guy who has played in that position before? I think I would, if Sonny Styles had been playing linebacker for more than 8 months now, I would look at that and say, yes, absolutely, he's the answer. I still think he might be the answer, but you're asking him to do some stuff for the first time. I think probably their best two linebackers, if Cody Simon isn't there, is Sonny Styles at the mic and CJ Hicks at the will. So I would lean in that direction in terms of who's going to be replacing Cody Simon, but they have multiple good options there. And again, I feel like we need to reiterate, this is not an injury, nor is the Donovan Jackson thing something that is expected to be a long-term thing. This is not something you need to be nervously checking how many days there are till the Oregon game. This feels much more precautionary.
Yeah, and I think the biggest benefit or the circumstance here is that whoever's making their first start of their career at middle linebacker is doing it against Akron, and not Notre Dame or Oregon. Because if they do need to make it against Notre Dame or Oregon or whomever at some point later in the season, they will have already done it. So I think it's one of these things that you take advantage of, like the illness on the offensive line that made the depth there better because so many guys were forced into action. You might have the same thing happen here with whoever it is, whoever gets that green dot on the back of their helmet, and is the Mike linebacker.
Both the mic and the speaker, as it turns out. Let's move on to the other names on today's availability report. And there are some guys on here which it's really kind of a bummer because there are guys who are not necessarily going to play a ton this year, but this was an opportunity potentially for them to see the field. Devontae Armstrong, offensive lineman, true freshman offensive lineman. Jaden Bonsu, true freshman safety. Cade Casto, a walk-on. Reese Stocksdale, a walk-on. He and TC Caffey, of course, out for the season. So that's it. So you have two other scholarship players who are going to be out for the game, both true freshmen who you thought, maybe you might see them on the field a little bit today. This is, if you were going to play guys for 4 games and still maintain the red shirts, this would definitely be one where you might see them. So kind of a bummer to not have those guys out there.
Yeah, and this is one where you play everybody you can, everybody who has proven that they are ready for something. And then also Ryan Day also talked about how Austin Searveld was thrust into action in practice and he excelled, and how he is using that as an example for his coaches. Like, hey, sometimes the players just need to play and then they will grow from that. So he is using that also as some messaging going on. So we'll see how that goes in this one. But they've got to get up big before any of that kind of happens.
There are a couple true freshmen who we will see potentially before they get up big. One of them is J.J. Smith, true freshman wide receiver. You were hearing about him, you were seeing stuff from him in high school and went, wow, that guy looks pretty different than a lot of other people. And then the first week of spring practice, it was kind of like, oh, yep. I see, aha, I see. And then he, in a lot of ways, he didn't have a very big day during the spring game, which was basically the only time, that's about the quietest I've ever seen him, is the spring game. But when we've been at practice, it's just constantly, hey, here's a long touchdown to J.J. Smith. Hey, he just went up and went between 2 defensive backs and pulled the ball down. Just crazy stuff. And it feels like the Ohio State fan base has been hearing about him. And you've seen these like little clips here and there on social media that look like, oh, wow, that looked cool. But they haven't really seen it. And this is the first potential chance for them to see it. I think to me that might be the single biggest item of interest, let's say, week 1 for Ohio State this year.
Yeah, I think so as well. Everybody wants to see it. I equate it to Maurice Clarett. When you heard so much you wanted to see him as a freshman, you wanted to see Orlando Pace and Andy Katzenmoyer. I think those are the main ones that I draw on, and this one is right there because the excitement has been building. I wonder what would have happened if you had social media back in 2002 and 1996 and 1994 with all of these other outstanding freshmen. So that has helped, but also the performances have really made it what it is. And so I'm very excited to see what happens. I hope for the fans that he puts on some sort of show, and it may not be 150 yards. But if you get to see like one 46-yard grab where he goes up over somebody, pulls it in, so that you can understand what we've been talking about. And he'll be out there, I assume, snap one. He's a starting wide receiver. It just depends on whether they can open up in 12 personnel or 11, and the personnel, so we'll see.
If they open up in 12 personnel and he's not on the field, they might get booed before they snap the football. I don't think they're going to want to do that. They could open up in 21 personnel because they've got a couple very, very talented running backs. Quinshon Judkins, also new to the Columbus, Ohio area, Ole Miss transfer. We have seen impressive things out of him. Travion Henderson feels like he's a little bit more of a known quantity for the Buckeyes, but it was still enormous when he came back. He was one of the later ones, I believe, in January to announce that he was coming back. But the combination of guy who you thought might be gone, who came back, and also guy who they added in the transfer portal, this running back room is in infinitely better shape. Even with only 4 scholarship guys there, it feels like this running back room is in infinitely better shape than it was the last time we attended a real live Ohio State football game.
You've got 2 guys that you can rely on, a third guy in true freshman James Peoples that they're excited about, and he's one of the few freshmen I think that can just show up in the first half of this game and play some snaps. I think he's done that well, but those 2 guys, you can rely on either of those guys as long as they're healthy. You know you can trust them. They're going to get you whatever they've got, and they've got a lot more than most running backs in the country have. So that keeps you ahead of schedule. That keeps you on schedule. And then you throw in Will Howard in there as well. I'm interested to see. I don't expect to see much running from him, maybe some scrambles, something like that. But I feel like this is going to be a team that runs the ball as well as any Ohio State team we've seen under Ryan Day. And I will remind you, Tom, since Ryan Day arrived, since he was hired as head coach, no Big Ten team has rushed for more yards than Ohio State in those 5 seasons.
That's interesting because you don't think of them as a rushing team. Since Ryan Day took over as the head coach, they have had a 2,000-yard rusher. So you know that they can run the ball, and there is a lot this year. Between the offensive line should be better. Between the running backs are pretty good. Between the running threat from the quarterback position now, the addition of Chip Kelly and his dynamic approach to the running game, there's a lot to suggest that this is going to be a pretty good year on the ground. I'm with you, though. I do not expect a ton of running from Will Howard just because I go back to the J.T. Barrett years where J.T. Barrett would run the ball 4 times against Rutgers and 3 times against Bowling Green or whoever they were playing. And then they'd run him 18 times against Penn State. I'm not sure I'm expecting a lot of 18, 20 carry games for Will Howard this year, but there's no reason to take a bunch of hits for Will Howard. If Will Howard came, they announced this halfway through fall camp that Will Howard was going to be the starter earlier than a lot of people were expecting. It felt like Will Howard had kind of separated himself from the rest of the pack, so you want to keep Will Howard upright and healthy as long as you can.
More carries for Devin Brown or Will Howard today?
Might be more carries for Devin Brown. That's a real possibility. How many quarterbacks do we see taking meaningful snaps that are not handing the ball off in the last 90 seconds of the game?
Well, I wonder if they the 3-4 thing is fascinating to me with Lincoln Kienholz and Julian Sayin. And if they get one in the game, is there an obligation to get the other in the game? And I know we don't play that way, but it's like when you're quarterbacks, you kind of have to be as friendly as possible in terms of whatever playing time you can offer. So I think, have we agreed that it will be 4? But 4 is so many.
4 is so many. I think you may see 4, but the 4th may come in the final 90 seconds kind of thing. The weather, of course, always a topic of conversation on these shows, and so let's hit the weather real quick. Not as brutally hot as it has been the previous couple days. Still pretty muggy down on the field. You don't get a ton of wind down on the field generally, so it's going to be a little more stagnant down there. I'm just going to read this from AccuWeather, so if you don't like this, you'll have to take this up with the good folks at AccuWeather and not me. Mostly cloudy and cooler, but humid with a thunderstorm. Storms may delay the football game. That's what it says right there on AccuWeather for Columbus, Ohio today. You look at the hour by hour, it's not too bad. It's 40% chance of rain, and nothing super serious. It doesn't look like you're going to have a long, extended, multi-hour issue. It's possible something pops up and there's a minor issue, but not too serious. So let's wrap it up with score predictions. What did you go with?
I went with 52-7. I think there's going to be a field goal in there. They get stopped somewhere, or perhaps a late first half field goal. Hey, we're 56 yards away. Let's go for it.
Yeah, this is sure. What the heck? Let's try. Yeah, well, it's not the spring game, but it could have all of the concern about losing that the spring game does by about halftime, because you look at the spring game. There are times when they just have the kickers. They just throw the kickers out there. Okay, yeah. You kick from 45. Okay, now kick one from 50. Yeah. Okay, now kick one from 55. You might see them just throw one out there.
It's good to get that experience in an actual game, rather than waiting until
until you really need it.
Yes.
Yeah, until the end of the first half in Ann Arbor, Michigan, for example. Yeah, this is one where you may see them do some different stuff just to try it, just see how different combinations of guys work, different situations work, all that kind of stuff. So make sure you check around. Make sure
your score.
Oh yes, my score. Yes, the most important part of the show. How could I forget? Ohio State 56, Akron 3. Tony, you never pick a shutout.
That's right.
When you look at Akron's offense and Ohio State's defense, I was tempted to pick a shutout, but you never pick a shutout. So yes, Ohio State 56, Akron 3. This feels like a game where I could see the Ohio State offense having a bad drive at some place at some point. I would be pretty darn surprised if the Akron offense strung together more than a 6-play drive against the first team Ohio State offense in the first half. And it's not because they're going to hit on a bunch of 80-yard touchdowns. I think it's going to be a lot of 3 and out probably in the first half. If I tell you that no Akron drive ends in Ohio State territory before the 5-minute mark. 5 minutes are left in the. Wow.
We better wrap up so that we can monetize.
See, I didn't do the air drumming. No Akron drives ends in the Ohio State territory before the 5-minute mark of the third quarter. You taking that? Yes or no?
No, because the first drive, they usually drive. The opening drive, they've been scripting it, so I'll say no.
All right. So make sure you hit the thumbs up button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the bell. We're going to be back after the game with our live post-game show. The post-game tailgate, sponsored by Tailgate USA, is all coming up after the game here at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Of course, make sure you check us out as well at BuckeyeHuddle.com. So for Tony Gerdeman and Peter Gabriel, I'm Tom Moore. We'll see you guys after the game.